Hi everyone. Today we're going to learn how to write the equation from the graph. Like before, we have learned if we have an equation, how we can graph that function. But now we already have the graph and we want to find the equation of it. So let's first of all write the general form of sinusoidal functions. The general form is y equal to c plus a sine or cosine of b theta minus d. If you remember, we said that c is the vertical shift, a is the amplitude, b affects the period of the function, and d is the horizontal shift. So if we find all these values in our graph, then we're good to write the function. Okay, so let's start with finding all these values. The first one that I'm going to find is c value. C is the vertical shift, or basically it gives us the horizontal midline of the function. We also call that sinusoidal axis. So the midline of this function is this dotted line, which is passing through the middle of this graph, and it's actually located at y equal to 0. That means we do not have any vertical shift, so c value is 0. To find the amplitude of the function, we just need to see how much we need to go up or down to reach to the highest or the lowest point, and that's equal to 12. So amplitude A or amplitude is 12. Then we need to find the b value. To find b, first of all, we need to find the period of the function. To find the period of function, we need to see how many degrees or radian our function needs to make a full cycle. To find a full cycle, I can look for two consecutive high points, like this one and this one. These are two consecutive high points, or even two consecutive middle points. Low points. So the distance between these 2 points is from 0 to 480. Is 480. The same is here. So if I look at the bottom points, the low points, again, 270 on the left and 270 on the right, and that adds up to 480. So as we see, the period is still 480. You could also consider two consecutive midpoints, middle points, like this one and this one. I don't consider this one as two consecutive midpoints because at this point, the cycle is not like a full cycle, it's half of a cycle. So I can consider this one as next repeating point. I'm going to consider this one. And again, the distance between them is from negative 120 to 360 is 480. So the period of the function is 480. And then we learned before that the period can be found by dividing 360 by the b value. So here we have the period, but we are looking for b value. So we need to solve for b. To solve that, I can cross multiply these and just switch b and 480 here. So here b is equal to 360 divided by 480. And if I simplify them, they are both divisible by 120, so that will be 3 and this one will be 4. So b value is 3 over 4. The last thing that I need to find is the d value. Finding the d value is a little bit tricky here. First of all, it depends on what kind of function we want to write. Here's the deal. To write an equation for this function, we don't have only one answer. We can have multiple answers. We can write a sine function, cosine function, a positive sine, a negative sine, positive cosine, negative cosine. So we have multiple functions for this. It depends on what we want to write. Okay, so I'm going to start writing a sine function. So if I want to write a sine function, I need to find a d value. How do I find this value? I know that the parent sine function looks like this. So it's a middle, high, middle, low, and middle. So I need to look for a pattern like this on my graph. What I see here is this one, for example. This is similar to the parent function. It's the middle, high, middle, low, and middle. So I can take this as my graph and then just find the horizontal shift of this graph, which is here at negative 120. So D is negative 120 here. This is a sine function which has been moved left for 120. Okay, so I have everything for this function. I'm going to start writing y equal to c is 0 plus a is 12, and then sine b is 3 over 4, and then theta minus negative 120. I can simplify this. Y equal to, I don't have to write the 0, so just write 12 sine of 3 over 4 theta plus 120, because minus negative will give us a positive. So this is the function if I want to write a sine function. What if I want to write a cosine function? So to find a cosine function here, I know that a cosine graph looks like this. The parent cosine graph looks like this. Starts with a high point, middle, low, middle, and high. So I'm going to look for a part of graph that looks like this. This is the first thing that I can see here. Okay, so this is a cosine function, and there's no horizontal shift because the start point is at 0 here. So D value is 0. For the cosine, D is 0. So I can write y equal to C again is the same thing, 0, plus A is 12. Then cosine, B is still the same thing, 3 over 4, theta minus 0. I can rewrite this just and simplify. So this will be 12 cosine of 3, 4 theta. So as you see, I was able to write two different functions for this graph. Basically, everything is the same, like the C value, A value, they are the same, B is the same. The only difference between them is the D value, and of course, the sine and cosine. I could also write another cosine function here, like this yellow one. This is also a cosine function. The horizontal shift for this one is at negative 480. So the second cosine that I can write is when I have the horizontal shift of negative 480. The graph, the function will look like 0 plus 12 cosine of 3 over 4 theta minus negative 480. So it will be 12 cosine of 3 over 4 theta plus 480. We can also find negative functions here. I'm going to do negatives for the next problem. So these are some of the functions that we could write for this. We could also find more. Basically, we have infinite number of functions for this graph. Okay, so next problem over here. Again, I'm going to follow the same general form. Y equal to C plus A cosine or sine B theta minus theta. So I'm going to start with finding C value. C, as we said, is the vertical shift. The middle line is here at 8. So that means we have a vertical shift of 8. C is 8. Amplitude is from 8 to 18, which is highest point. This distance is 10. And then the B value, to find the B value, we need to find the period first. To find the period, we are going to consider two consecutive high points or low points, like these ones, or the distance between these ones. As you see, the distance between negative 5 and negative 45 is 40. We're just taking the distance between them, so we don't care if they are negative. Just drop the negatives and just find the distance between them. We're not talking about the direction, just the distance. So again, here, you see we have 15 on the right and negative 25 here. So 25 on left and 15 on the right. 15 plus 25 is 40. So it's always 40. This is the period. And then 360 divided by b is the period. To find the b value, we cross multiple, and then we will have b equal to 360 divided by 40, which is 9. So we found the value of b. Now we're going to look for the d value, which we said depends on the function that we want to write. Let's say, for example, I want to write a sine function. So I need to find the d value. The sine graph that I can see here, the first one is this one. So it's middle, high, middle, low, and middle. Basically, we are just looking for a pattern like this for sine, and we found it here. The start point is at negative 35, so d value is negative 35. Now the function will be y equal to c, which is 8, plus 10 amplitude, and then we're writing sine, so I want to write sine here. B is 9, and theta minus negative 35, which will be plus 35. Now let's find a cosine function. To find a cosine function, I'm going to look for a pattern like this. Starts with the high point. This is what I can see here. High, middle, low, middle, and high. The starting point for this one is at negative 25. So d value is negative 25. Now I can write the function y is equal to 8 plus 10. You see everything is the same. And then I have cosine of 9 theta minus negative 25, which will be plus 25. So the only difference between them is this d value, the horizontal shift, and also the function itself, like sine and cosine. This time, I'm going to find a negative sine and cosine. So if I want to write a sine which is negative, I need to look for this function. You see, if this is sine function, negative sign will be upside down of this, like flipped form of sine, which is a reflected over x-axis. So I need to look for this green one, a pattern which looks like this green one. Middle, low, middle, high, and middle. So what I see here is this one. So this is a sine function which is kind of flipped. The start point is at negative 15. So d is negative 15. Now the function will be y equal to 8 plus 10, or basically, excuse me, not plus 10, minus 10. Why? Because this is a flipped sign. It's a reflected sign function. So we have a negative sign here. Negative 10 sine of 9 theta minus negative 15, which will be plus 15. Now I'm going to write a negative cosine. For negative cosine, I need to find a function like this. If this is the cosine, parent cosine, negative cosine will be reflected form of this over the x-axis, like this form. It's an upside down curve. Starts with a low point, low, middle, high, middle, and low. So what I can find here is, let me erase this first. Okay, so what I can find here is this, a middle point that goes up and then goes back down here. So this is a flipped cosine function. D value is negative 45 here. D is negative 45. Now I can write the function y equal to 8 minus, so I wrote negative because this is an upside down cosine function, minus 10 cosine 9 theta minus negative 45, which will be plus 45. So as you see, we have multiple answers, and we can even write more functions. I'm not going to write them, but I will show you how to find other functions, like another negative sign function would be this one. This is another negative sign function. It's an upside down sign function. Then another negative cosine function could be this one, which is starting from here, although I don't have the rest of it, but I know that this is going to continue. So this can be the next cosine function. The starting point for this one is negative 8. So as you see, we can find multiple answers for these kind of questions. Okay, let's do the last one over here. Again, the general form. You need to memorize this. Y equal to C plus A sine of B theta minus D, or cosine. So let's start with the C value. The C value, as you see, is the middle line, which is at 7. Amplitude is from middle line to the highest or the lowest point, and that's equal to 4. Then I need to find the period first. To find a period, take two consecutive low points. So from negative 50 to 70, we have 50 here and 70 here. If you add them, it will be 120. So the period of this function is 120. Or even if you want to consider two consecutive high points, again, these two, from 10 to 130, it's still 120. This is 360 divided by B. So I do the cross multiple, and then from here, B is equal to 360 divided by 120, which is 3. So we found the B value. Now we can start finding the B and writing the equation. Okay, so I'm going to start with a sine function. So I need to find the D. The sine graph that I see here, the first one that I can see here is this one. The starting point of this function is at negative 20. So D is negative 20. Now I can write my function. Y is equal to C, which is 7, plus 4, which is the amplitude, and then sine of B, which is 3, theta minus negative 20, which is equal to plus 20. So this is a sine function. Now I'm going to write a negative sine function. For a negative sine function, I can look at this part of my graph. This is a reflected sine graph. Starts from negative 80. So this is sine, which D is negative 80. And Y will be equal to 7 plus 4. Sorry, I keep forgetting to write a negative here. 7 minus sine of 3 theta minus negative 80, which is plus 80. So I wrote a negative here because the sine graph was flipped. Now I'm going to write a cosine function. Okay, so I need to look for a cosine graph. This is the first thing that I can see. I could also consider this one. Doesn't matter. Both of them are right. Just their start point is going to be different. Okay, so this one starts from negative 110. So the starting is negative 110. So Y will be 7. This is an upside, like the normal graph of cosine. So I have a positive for cosine of 30 theta minus 110. Minus negative 110, which will be positive 110. Next one, I'm going to write a negative cosine function. So I need to look for an upside down cosine, which is this one. This is an upside down cosine graph. Starts from negative 50. So D is negative 50 and Y will be 7 plus, oh, again, I made this mistake, 7 minus, because the cosine graph is upside down, 7 minus 4 cosine of 3 theta minus negative 50, which is positive 50. So as you see, we can find several functions for one graph. Either of them you write is correct and acceptable. So this was today's lesson. Have a great day.